Well, good morning, and thanks for joining today. It's a delight to see so many familiar names on the call, as well as many new attendees. For those who don't know me, I am Bruce Anthony, and I'm one of the trainers with Service Technologies. Now, before we get moving with today's topic, I want you to be aware that I have several colleagues on the call today who can answer your questions via the Questions tab, which you should see under or next to the hand-raising icon. So please feel free to ask away throughout the webinar. They will answer your questions directly, and if those are appropriate for the entire group, they'll pass them along to me so I can address them to the larger group. I also want to note that if you have to leave before you receive a response, our customer support team will reach out to you after the webinar. And one final note before you begin, you may already be aware, but we do have all of the past webinars recorded and available on our YouTube tutorial channel. We'll look at this again towards the end of our time here today, but you can access that by going to video.servicetech.com. And with that, let's move into our topic for today, which is going to be looking at a smattering of areas throughout service with some updates that I wanted to highlight for you in case you had missed them. Now, hopefully you've seen some of these things in your own console and started using them already, but if not, that's why we're here today. Now, before we just dig right in, I want to share with you our changelog, which is where you can always see posted updates. And we do perform an update about once a month. So if you want to get information about what updates have been posted or how to view that data, the best resource is going to be, again, that changelog. And you can see that whenever you're logged in, at the bottom of the page, you have this Need Help button. This is how you contact our support team and search through our different knowledge base articles. The changelog is one of those articles. So if you click on that Need Help button, search for changelog, you'll see that kind of right at the top. You can open that up in here and just scroll through the updates. Personally, I prefer to pop this out into a new page. I just find it a little bit easier to read as kind of the larger format. There's also a little bit better formatting in here to begin with. So you can scroll through this and see different updates. Again, we're going to be going through a lot of this stuff today, but whenever we post a new update, you'll see this kind of as a message at the top of your page, and you can always go and search for the changelog and check out those updates directly as well. Okay, with that said, let's kind of dig into it. Like I said, we're going to be going through several different areas of the console today, so we'll kind of be jumping around, but I want to start off with updates to some messaging features. One of those updates has to do with birth dates. There are two different birthday messages that you can send to volunteers. You'll see those in the system configuration. Now, this is only relevant if you are tracking birth date. So in the information collection section, you can check whether or not you're tracking birth date in here. You have track volunteer birth date as either required or optional. If either of those is set to, or if this is set to either of the yes options, then you can send out some messaging on people's birthdays. So if we scroll down, there's two sections I want to point out: page content and email message content. At the bottom of the page content section, you will see this birthday banner option. So in here, you can enable this or disable it. You can pick what icon you'd like to have appear next to this message, and then also what the greeting itself says, and then the message. This message can use the first name variable, so can the greeting. So if you wanted it to say happy birthday, Bruce, or whomever, you would just write in that first name variable. Now you can check what this banner looks like. If you click on this preview icon, you'll be able to see what that message looks like to the volunteer when they log in. So again, this would show up if the volunteer happened to log into the system on their birthday. There's one other birthday message, and that's in the email message content, and that's at the bottom of this section as well. And this is just an automated birthday email. So probably pretty used to that kind of messaging, but you can set one of those up through here. Again, you can enable this or disable it. You write out the subject, write out the message you'd like to utilize, and once again, you can use the first name variable. In this case, you can also use the last name variable if you'd like to. And I just want to point this out. I know I did this previously, but it's important for you to know. Anytime a variable is in play for a particular field, you'll see that in the information box next to that field. So if you mouse over that, you can see what the variable is. You don't need to memorize what it is. You'll always see it, when it's relevant. But again, same thing. You can write out a message through here. If you want to preview what that email looks like, you can check that out. But this is just a message sent to volunteers on their birthday. Okay, so that's just kind of a birthday message I wanted to mention. Another, kind of switching gears here, another message that you can use relates to text messaging. So when you have an event set up with a waitlist, if you have text messaging enabled in your system, then when a volunteer is added from the waitlist to the event, they'll get a text message that lets them know they've been added to the event and gives them kind of the relevant information. This just automatically takes place if you have the waitlist enabled and text messaging enabled in your system. Obviously, the volunteer has to have text messaging enabled for their number, but that message just gets sent directly to the volunteer. Okay, couple more things. Again, we're just kind of moving quickly through some messaging options. When you are sending emails in Service, hopefully you have already in the past used template options, but now you have the ability to update existing templates or replace them, as opposed to deleting old versions and saving new versions. So if you have an existing template that you'd like to modify, you can just go in and update that. And then basically once you've made changes to it, then you could click on replace and essentially replace the existing template with whatever your new changes have been made. So kind of reduced 2 steps down to 1. So that's kind of a helpful tool when you're working with templates. Now these templates, you'll see them any place that you are sending a message through Service. And then there's also a place to manage templates on the main dashboard under the System Management heading. Now while we're in here, I also want to point out, and this happened a while ago, but I like to point this out in case you missed it, you can use that same first name variable when you're sending blast emails through Service as well. So if you wanted to, address volunteers directly instead of using a generic term like volunteers, you can throw that variable in here. The system parses this out based on the recipients, so the system knows who the recipients are and it's going to address them by their first name in the system. If you happen to have, let's say, couples or families who share an email address, the system knows that, and it's not going to send them multiple copies of the same email. It's going to send them one email where the first name actually addresses that family. And for those of you who care, it does use the Oxford comma, and I like that. Okay, so that's some messaging in terms of emailing and templates, and I just wanted to point out again that first name variable. You can also now save templates with text messaging. So when you are sending text messages through your system, again, of course, this has to be enabled. But if you're sending a text message, you have the option to create and use templates. So same options we saw on the previous screen for emailing. You can save, load, replace, or delete templates. So if you find yourself sending a similar weather cancellation type of message or just sort of invitation or whatever it is, you can save templates for those now. Okay, so that's a quick look at some messaging updates. We're going to switch gears here to registrations. And I want to talk about a few different changes that have been made to recording activity and also reviewing or viewing registrations in your system. So we're going to move over to opportunity management. When you are in the Search Manage Existing Opportunities page, you may already be aware there is a calendar view on this page. It's not something that's expanded automatically. So in case you hadn't seen that, that is here. And this just shows you a calendar of all your upcoming events. There is now an option in this calendar to view direct registration details. So basically you can see the list of all of the registered volunteers directly on this page. Now, I find this to be useful when you have run searches, not when you're looking at absolutely everything in your system. So if I click on this right now, you can see that there are a ton of names here because all of my currently open projects, all of my events that are ongoing, I see all of the registered people who are currently active. So again, when I'm looking at all my projects, that's not necessarily the most useful thing. But let's say I were to just search for a certain subset of my events. Maybe I want to only go and view events themselves or only a specific, tagged event or things like that. Like I have several events in my system that are tagged with the idea of being family friendly. So I could go and search for those. Once I've run that search, if I look at the calendar here, you can see that the calendar is reduced to just showing those events that I've searched for. And now that view registration or include registration details a little bit more useful because it's much less information kind of being displayed at once. But if you just want like a listing of all those people on one page and just see all those names at once, this is how you can do that now. And this calendar is something that you can create a printout of. So there's a print option up here. Obviously that would be static, but you can just print that out, if you want a physical copy of that to pin up somewhere. I find this also to be useful with service project scheduling. So if you're using service projects and you have volunteers who are registered on kind of like regular bases, or you've scheduled that out, you can see that information here. In particular, I'm just talking about the print option now, not necessarily including registration detail because that's already listed there. Okay, a couple more things with viewing and engaging with registrations. Recently, we added the option for reservation codes to kind of be displayed in line with the actual shifts. So when you're looking at, for example, a time slot event where you have reservation codes in play, you'll see those unused reservations at the top of each time slot. So you can see like if a particular group is going to be coming in and you want to know that, even if the reservation code hasn't been used yet. Like in these examples, the reservation code has kind of been consumed, at least partially, so I can see at a glance, who's using that. But at the top here, we can see the code itself. And if I mouse over this preview icon, I can also see some more information about that code, like what group it's actually affiliated with. Okay, and then also on this page, you now have the option to add a column of data to what is displayed. So by default, this page always contains, when someone was registered and by whom on the left-hand side of this calendar icon. If you mouse over that, it also tells you, of course, who you're looking at, who is registered. You get their contact information. If a reservation code is in use, you'll see that. Notes and impact tracking are on the right-hand side. But now you can also add a custom column to this page. And this is unique for every single opportunity that you create. So if we back up a step and go into update this opportunity and scroll down in the additional organizer options section, there's an option in here to include extra information or include the following information in the registration listing for this opportunity. By default, this is set to none, but maybe you just want a quick view of volunteers' t-shirt sizes or their age based on their birth date, or what tags are on their profile, or what skills they have selected, or any custom field you've set up. Right? There's a bunch of different options in here. And essentially you can just select that through here. So if we throw in the age, and if I update this event, now if we go back to view the registered volunteers, we can see there's a new column that shows me the volunteers' ages on this page. So if you just want that as a part of the quick view as you're kind of evaluating the registered volunteers, this can be a pretty helpful tool. I want to mention too, if you are using events that have the pending registration option enabled, which just as a reminder, that's basically a stopgap. So if people are interested in an event, they can, apply for it essentially. They get added as a pending registration. So this can be useful when you're evaluating registrations like that as well, before you decide to either approve or reject volunteers from a page like this. Okay, so that's kind of a couple options related to, reviewing registrations. We're going to shift gears again a little bit here to talk more about recording activity or letting volunteers use like the sign-in console. So something we've added, which is a little hard to showcase here, but basically you can create a link that would direct volunteers to a page where they can perform a mobile sign-in. So if you are asking volunteers to sign in from a centralized location, but you want them to use their phone to sign in, so to do a mobile sign-in, which is a setting when you set up your events. You can tell the system that you want to allow mobile sign-in, and you can geofence it or tell it to ignore location or use any location. But if you have this turned on to allow mobile sign-in for an event, normally a volunteer would use the link that's sent to them in the confirmation message and the reminder email, or the reminder text message to sign in at the event when they arrive. But now you can also create a direct link that you might post as, for example, a QR code. And then volunteers could scan that QR code with their phone. And even if they had forgotten their email or deleted it or didn't get the text or whatever, they could scan that QR code when they arrive, and that would send them to the same place where they can use mobile sign-in for that shift. So again, kind of hard to show in this moment. It'd be more something that you would do on site. But if you want to grab that link, just contact our support team and they can send you a copy of that. Again, you can turn that into a QR code and post it somewhere so that volunteers can do mobile sign-in when they arrive, or you can, link it and send it out or text it out or whatever. Okay, and then one more item kind of along those lines of volunteers engaging the platform. We updated so that when volunteers are recording service project activity, if you have impact tracking enabled for that service project, then when a volunteer is recording activity for that project, so if I go in here and say, okay, today I worked on this project for an hour and a half, I could add some notes in here, but I also have impact tracking turned on for this project, it'll be prompted in the next step. So now when I click to record this, it's going to pop up the impact tracking metrics, and it's going to say, hey, how many new vocab words did you identify? How many pages were read by the student? So it's going to ask that information in the same step as the volunteer is logging activity. So just to be clear, this information is something that is based on that project, right? So I have this Reading Mentors project in my system that I have set up so that volunteers can record activity online, which if we back up to the admin side, when you create a service project, you can tell the system that you want to log hours online, on-site, or both. This is how volunteers can interact with the project. So online or both would mean that a volunteer can log in after the fact and retroactively record activity. So that's what we were doing in this case. And so I have that project set up this way. And also for that project, I have some impact tracking metrics enabled. And so those impact tracking metrics will just pop up as they're logging those hours as well. Okay, so again, that feature is kind of unique to service projects, a very specific scenario of using service projects with recording activity, but I find that to be really helpful when you're having volunteers, logging those hours. They can also be requested to provide that additional impact tracking information at the same time. Okay, we're going to switch gears here to kind of reporting and searching. There have been some updates here that I want to point out to you. In particular, in the opportunity management section and in groups, you now have the ability to save searches just like we do on the volunteer side. So if you have a particular set of events that you constantly are looking back for, whether it's based on some kind of combination of tag and organizer or type of event and tag or whatever the data is, you can go and run an advanced search for those set of events, whether it uses a keyword or whatever else. Go and run your search, and then in here you can click to save a search. So same as we see on the volunteer side, you can save a search, give it a title. Once you've saved that, you can load that up at any time. So this is true in the group management side as well. You can run a search for like a set of groups based on tags or notes or keywords or contacts. There is also a new advanced search option in groups that lets you run searches by things like if they've served more than a certain number of times, or if they had a certain number of no-shows, or they had their first activity. These particularly relate to bulk group registrations, not reservations. But anyway, once you've run a search on groups, same thing. You can then go and save that search and reuse that or load that up whenever you want to look for that group of volunteers or group of groups rather. And then likewise, just like with volunteers, if you go into report management, you can reuse those saved searches. So they'll populate in the list for like the custom participation report. You can reuse your saved volunteer searches. You can reuse saved group searches, saved opportunity searches. Those will all pop up in here. And while we're on this page, you have the same option to use these queries now when you are running your yearly participation summary report, which if you're not familiar with this report, this is effectively a monthly report that you can run for calendar years or fiscal years. What it will do is it will take 12 months from your starting month and then give you summaries for those months. So if your fiscal year starts in March, we could go in here and say, okay, March 2020, give us that fiscal year, and then it'll run that report for you starting with March 2022. I think I said 2020, meant 2022. The queries here are the same as we saw in the first report type though. So those options now apply down here. So if you want to run a monthly, a yearly report by month using a particular set of information, you can run, your searches or your queries and then apply those to whatever the report is, that you want to use, whether it's this one or the custom participation report, which is more like a summary. Okay, a couple more search options I want to point out. In the advanced volunteer search, you have the option now, and there's a few things that I want to point out here. One is under participation options. You can run a search for volunteers that have participated or will participate in their first activity between two dates. So if you want to find like your first time volunteers who are going to be here this week or next week, you can go and run that type of search, and this will just show you people who have their first activity occurring between these two dates. So really helpful if you're trying to identify who those first timers are and make sure that they have the help that they need. Again, you can also run this retroactively. So maybe I want to see, well, who participated in their first activity, so far this month. I want to go and email those people and ask them how it went, or, invite them to something else. This, again, can be a pretty helpful search. It's not searching for people with only one registration. This is people whose first activity is occurring between these dates. Another really important search feature that was added is in the advanced options now. When you're running an advanced search, at the very bottom, there's a new option added that lets you combine your results with your previous search. So let's say I just searched for all my volunteers who are doing their first activity at the start of the month. So let's go ahead and run that search. We'll just use a different example here. But once I run a search, if I go back into the advanced search and scroll down to the bottom, I can say, hey, now I want to search within those results. So basically combine my new search with what I just ran. This is really helpful for rerunning basically the same filter to get kind of more specific info. So an example that I often see used is in participation options, you can find volunteers that have served more than, exactly, less than, or between a certain number of times or hours or impact tracking metrics between two dates. So for example, you might want to find anybody who served at least one time last year. What you would do is go in here and say, find someone with more than 0 registrations between January 1st, 2022 and December 31st, 2022, right? So we can essentially run a search for anyone with at least one registration last year. So if we run that search, then I could go back into the advanced search and say, okay, now of those people who served at least one time last year, how many of them haven't done anything yet this year? So I'm using the same searching mechanic, but I'm able to basically use it twice. If I use that advanced option here and say, combine my results of this current search with what my previous search was. So really useful tool. Again, especially like this type of scenario where you're using the exact same search in two different kind of ways to narrow your results. You can basically say, within my previous search, let's run a new search. Okay. Couple things once you've run a search in the system. There's a few new things that I want to point out as far as bulk actions that you can take. So once you've run a search, all of the standard options exist here to send emails, send text messages. There's a ton of printouts here. There are a couple new printouts, like for example, photo name tags, photo ID badges, QR code badges that just contain some extra information. And then I also wanted to mention that if you are running background checks through Service using Backgrounds Online, you can submit background checks in bulk now. So up to 20 at a time, you can go through and select, a number of results and then submit all of them at once as opposed to doing one at a time. Okay. All right, we're going to move into kind of the last section that I wanted to cover today as far as updates. And then, of course, we can move into questions if there are any ones that we need to address here. But there have been some updates to different settings that I want to point out in the system configuration, just to make sure that you're aware of those different features and options that are available for you. So one option that you can choose to use now is to default volunteers to being inactive. You might not want to do this in most cases, but essentially you can set volunteers to either be active or inactive when their account is initially created. If you have in place a pretty stringent onboarding process where you need to vet and then approve each individual, you might want volunteers to be set as inactive until they've gone through your process, and then you can add them to your active pool of volunteers. So basically this setting here just allows you to toggle where do volunteers start. Do they start as active or do they start as inactive? By default, if you've never changed this, haven't seen this setting, it will be set to active. Service does not mark volunteers as inactive automatically. That's something that you would need to do manually based on whatever metric you might define as an inactive volunteer. But again, this setting kind of flips that on its head. It would start volunteers as inactive, and then you would mark them as active manually once they've met whatever that criteria is. So depending on your workflow, this might be useful. But for, like I said, the default for every organization is that this is set to active. Okay, and then another setting in the opportunity management settings is that when you have an event with an upcoming scheduled posting date, do you want that to be initially hidden or posted as coming soon? So you might not be aware of this setting at all, so let's kind of walk through what this is. Whenever you create an opportunity in Service, what controls whether or not it's visible is the publish online option, right? This is set to no by default. When you're ready to publish an event, you set it to yes open. That means volunteers can sign up for it, they can see it, and all that kind of thing. You can also, of course, post events as closed, canceled, coming soon, contact us in varying situations. But you might have a situation where you want to publish an event, but not yet. You want it to go live at a certain time. Maybe you have a whole host of events that you've told your volunteers are going to go live for registration this Friday at noon. What you can do is when you create the event, set publish online to yes open, but then in the advanced options, you can set a scheduled posting date. Now by default, this date is this morning, 12:05 this morning, so it's going to go live if you click yes publish. But I could post date this, so I could say, okay, hold this event until noon on Friday. And then the system will essentially hold the event and then open it for volunteers once this time passes. So the setting we're talking about here is going to tell the system, what do I do with those held events until this posting time comes? So again, just to clarify, if you're wanting to do this, you would set the publish online to yes open. So you still set it to yes open, but then you just set a scheduled posting date, and the system will withhold it until this date and time. How it withholds it is up to that setting. So in the system configuration, under opportunity management settings, you have display opportunities with an upcoming scheduled posting date as either hidden or coming soon. So if it's hidden, it's exactly what it sounds like. The system won't publish it until the date and time passes that you want it published. If it's posted as coming soon, it will be listed, but it will say coming soon, and volunteers can't register until that date and time passes. So that setting is up to you. It's a global setting. It affects any event that you have scheduled as a posted event. Okay, and then one final setting that I want to make sure you're aware of is in the security and privacy settings, you have the option to allow volunteers to upload file attachments to their profile. This has been in the system for a bit. We've talked about this on other webinars as well, but we added another feature in here to basically have admin-only documents. So any document that you post to a volunteer's profile, you can now mark as private or admin-only. This setting means that when a volunteer uploads a document to their profile, it will also be posted as admin-only. So what that actually looks like, if we go into the volunteer database, for anyone who has an attachment on their profile, you now have an option, this kind of locked icon to restrict access. The default state for that setting is that documents aren't restricted. So what that means is leadership team members and group leaders for their group can manage these documents too. But if you want to, you can restrict access. So that would mean that only admin can engage this document. So you can make it so that when a volunteer uploads a document to their profile, it's set to admin only by default. So leadership team, group leaders wouldn't be able to see or engage that document. Okay, and then just to kind of round that out, I want to make sure you're aware. Again, we talked about this previously, but I think it's an important setting to point out. If you want to, you can allow volunteers to upload their own documents. So when a volunteer is logged into their profile, I just use this profile icon to switch to the volunteer view. In a volunteer's account, under profile management, they can upload attachments to their account. And this basically just lets them add documents to their profile that you can then engage with. So if you're having volunteers turn in documents to you, scan something or upload images or whatever, that can be done through this field. Okay, well, those are the kind of updates that I wanted to go through today. I know we went through a lot of different information in a lot of different places in the console. Of course, if you have questions about any of these things that we've covered, your best resource is going to be our customer support team. They are excellent. If you click on the Need Help button here, you can type in a question. So let's say we want to learn more about reporting. You type in that term, you'll see articles here. If you like to learn this way, this is a great resource. It gives you, step-by-step instructions about how to do particular tasks. But no matter what you've searched by, you can always click on Contact Us and then submit a ticket through here to our customer support team. And then I also wanted to point out again that if you are interested in reviewing more videos, if you go to video.servicetech.com, that'll take you to our YouTube channel, and you can review posted recorded webinars. We also have short form tutorials posted on here as well. We have a bunch of different playlists that walk through different areas. This is a great resource. There's a lot of information listed here. All right. Well, thank you for your time here today. We covered a lot of information, obviously. If you do have any more specific questions, please let our support team know. I think there's a couple questions that they're responding to that are a little bit more specific, and so they're going to keep addressing those. If you have more questions, feel free to write those in. But we are done with our content for today here. So again, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure to speak with you all and to see so many familiar people in the chat. I look forward to our next meeting, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.